Hey y'all, I'm Shauna. Welcome in or welcome back to the channel. Welcome to a new video. Today we are talking hobbies. We are going to be talking about shopping as a hobby and why it is quite often a destructive hobby. And we're also going to be talking about the importance of non-shopping hobbies. I used to say that shopping was not a hobby or shopping is not a hobby. However, that isn't true. Shopping is and can be a hobby. It's just a destructive one, in my opinion. I'm going to be drawing on a lot of personal experience in this video because I was somebody who had a shopping hobby and I did not realize how destructive it was until I stopped. So if you're thinking about changing how you shop or you're in the midst of it, I think you need a hobby that is not shopping. And this whole video is going to be dedicated to talking about why. Let's start off with shopping and why is it so destructive as a hobby? I think shopping is the case of the dose makes the poison. Shopping isn't inherently wrong or inherently negative. You're not a problematic person or engaging in problematic behaviors because you shop or because you enjoy shopping. It's when we do it in excess that it becomes a problem. And shopping, I think this does extend to many hobbies, not just shopping, but shopping can fill any little nook and cranny of time that you give it. I also believe that it will often take more from you than it gives you. And I really do think that it is the pleasure component that can allow us to ignore some of the red flags that we might see or experience. So let's get into some of those red flags. The number one, most obvious one is financial strain. I'm saying financial strain here because you can go into debt, but just because you are not in debt does not mean that your shopping is not a problem. I personally did not get into credit card debt, and I was very lucky that I did not, and my credit score kind of remained unscathed, but I spent every penny that I had. Like, there were moments where I had like $12 in my bank account. I have done some absolutely stupid shit that I am just so lucky, and all it was luck that nothing happened. Shopping was so pleasurable that I was willfully ignorant. I didn't want to know. I was not looking, and I was looking as little as possible, avoided it when I could. I was ignoring my finances, which meant that I was not saving money. I was not in debt, but I also wasn't saving money. How do you move out? How do you buy a house? How do you save up for retirement? How do you put money into your children's education funds? How do you buy a new car? How do you lease a new car? How do you do almost anything if you have no money for it? Shopping can be an absolute time suck. It can become like a black hole where it will take every single ounce of time that you have. It can take as much time as you give it. And I think like another comparable example could be like TikTok, where you get to the end of the day or the week or the month or even the year and you go, where did all my time go? I have had many a week where I went, wait, what the hell did I do this week? I did nothing because I was doing my activities like going to school and then coming home and then spending all of my free time shopping. And I spent every moment of downtime I could shopping, even going on the train or, like commuting especially. Or I would come home from a day, I would spend 3 hours that day commuting, having time at school, waking up early, and I want to come home and de-stress, and I would go shopping. And I'll say, oh, it'll just be 20 minutes. I just want to watch this video or I just want to look on this website, and then 2 hours will go by. Shopping isn't just strolling in the mall or scrolling online. It's the trying on the clothes, driving to the post office to make returns or driving to the stores to make the returns, printing out mailing labels and packing up all of your packages, managing the returns in your home or your car. And then you have returns going to UPS or Canada Post, FedEx, Purelator, then this one can is in-store only. Like, you're like having this whole management system of returns. You can be compiling carts and spending time compiling carts on different websites. You could be spending time looking for deals and coupons, watching reviews, watching hauls, watching comparisons, doing your research. Research is an important component of buying stuff and, kind of doing your due diligence. But there is a point where it becomes obsessive and overkill, and also a way to continuously engage in shopping content. And also just being on socials, sometimes you might not go on TikTok or YouTube to go watch some kind of consumer-driven content or buy something content, but you can find yourself there anyways. One of the things I noticed, and I've heard this a ton in the comments over the years, is when you reduce the amount of time on socials, or you tweak how you spend that time, like when you're on YouTube and you have, I think, more control over TikTok. Yes, you can search on TikTok, but just like the layout of like your homepage or your browse page gives you more control. So even if you're on YouTube and instead of watching the eyeshadow reviews, you're watching the Shop My Stash. So you're still on it, but tweaking the content that you're watching. One thing people notice is their desire to shop decreases. You're seeing ads less. You're seeing less shopping content, less people excitedly telling you about how great something is and you should buy it. It's this time suck that can become overlooked, and it's one of those things that makes like swapping out shopping for something else really powerful and really like a great option in a lot of cases. One of the things about shopping and this kind of time suck component is that shopping does give you that pleasure, but it's not something that brings us satisfaction in our life. One of the things I realized was that I was spending time on shopping instead of all of the other things, the things that I've said matter to me, like spending time with my partner or, friends and family, or doing things that I find personally fulfilling or rewarding or, connecting with my values in some kind of way. Things that fill up our cups, if you will. Things that make life more enjoyable or are pleasurable in healthy ways. Now, instead of shopping at night, I'll read or I'll watch some uplifting content. My reading skyrocketed once I stopped shopping. I began reading in 2019. Reading for fun again, and I had not read for many years because I was in school and just reading was kind of a shit time. So my first year I started reading was 20 books. That was like a struggle to get to 20. The next year that I read over 50 books, more in the ballpark of 60. Now, this year, I'm on track to read over 100 books. I'm at 95 right now. My reading basically doubled or tripled really because of how I was spending my time. I'm not saying that you need hobbies that are productive. Reading isn't a productive hobby, most especially because I'm not learning anything from it. It is like a downtime, like a way to, it's downtime. I find reading something that is pleasurable, similar to how shopping was pleasurable, but it like nourishes my spirit and brings me so much joy. It makes life better. Lastly, shopping can be a maladaptive coping strategy and a way to deal with stress, tough emotions, or life circumstances. And not everybody who shops as a hobby or who has a shopping problem does use shopping as an avoidance technique or a way to deal with stress. However, I do think that if you are one of these people, one of the shopping feels like a problem kind of people, that you've probably engaged in retail therapy at some point and is probably a part of how you shop. Maybe not a big one, but I think this applies to a lot of people. And if this is not you, great. Shopping as a coping strategy can be intentional, like I'm going to go to Sephora to get a pick-me-up. It can also feel a bit more instinctual when you're having like a tough time and you just kind of get that itchy feeling. For me personally, this was like one of the worst side effects of shopping, and also one of the drivers of shopping as a hobby, because I would, experience tough emotions and then I would want to go online to shop, and then I would spend hours and hours and hours kind of curating carts and wanting to check out and watching stuff, and it just drove a lot of time into shopping, or wanting to go I had a tough class. I'm just going to go to the mall after class and unwind, or even like a a self-acknowledged, self-expressed retail therapy kind of thing. This developed during my shopping as a hobby phase. I didn't realize it at the time or realize how problematic it was, but I sure as hell realized it when I tried to stop shopping. And it became my go-to stress response. That's how I learned I had a problem. And I kind of felt like I had no control over my life because when I was stressed or emotional, I wanted to shop and I just felt like I couldn't stop. I have an entire video on emotional shopping if you're interested to hear more. For all of these reasons, I felt, personally speaking, that shopping was more harmful than helpful. One thing I've heard from you guys over the years is kind of more of the social components of shopping, kind of isolating yourselves from friends or family, people who didn't shop, or people who felt like you were engaging in problematic behavior or buying too much stuff. And if you have a friend group that does participate in it, it could be really incentivized to shop and potentially difficult to stop. And I think it's worth considering, do you find shopping a fulfilling hobby? Regardless if it's a yes or no, kind of why or why not. And number two, do you find personally shopping to be more helpful than harmful or more harmful than helpful? If you do want to stop shopping and you just stop, you may notice a void in your life. And it's this reason why I think that switching out shopping for something else is just a really wonderful idea. So you don't get that void. And if you find something that is fun, pleasurable, joyful even, it can help make the transition into shopping less or stopping shopping easier and more fun. There's also a good chance that shopping is a hobby for you, that you are riding the dopamine roller coaster. You get the high of buying something new, the researching for it, the tracking it, the getting it, the trying it on, all of that. Once that thing is in your possession, you're no longer riding the high. You're kind of on that like plateau, maybe that's not quite the right word, and you want to get that high again. And so you need to rectify that by buying something new. Or maybe you just want to feel that high again. If you remove shopping, you can remove that dopamine roller coaster, and that can be a really tough thing. And so replacing it with something that you also find a pleasure in can be great. I think that's why reading really works for me, because I do get highs and I do get like, I do kind of still experience the roller coaster a little bit, but it's not the same. Like, I love the romantasy genre, so I'm like, get together, get together, get together, get together, and then they get together, and I'm like, yeah. Or, you know, like there's like the big bad, and they foiled the plans, and you're like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? Kind of similar but different. Because I think shopping takes more than it gives, I think it's really hard to find shopping fulfilling. And one of the best things about getting an alternative hobby is getting that fulfillment from it. And other hobbies can help us lead more fulfilling lives. Hobbies can help us feel more content in our life. Happiness and contentment are different things. Happiness is a fleeting emotion that is built on usually external factors and largely pleasure. Contentment is more of like an internal state of being that requires more intentionality to cultivate. More on this another time. Video forthcoming. Shopping, generally speaking, can't make us feel contentment, but it can make us feel happiness, and that's the entire reason why some of us get stuck on that pleasure roller coaster. Hobbies, because they can attach or they can kind of connect with us on a deeper level, we can experience contentment with them. So let's talk about alternative hobbies now. What makes a good hobby? I have a few things on my list, and I would like to hear from you. What would you add to this list? Because I'm not expecting all of these things to apply to every hobby. I'm hoping one of them applies, but I also think that there could be other things that I might have missed. So what would be something you would add? That like something that makes a good hobby for you. And also these aren't in order of importance. So the first thing is that you like it and you find it fulfilling. Ideally, it's an outlet for your passion or interest, but that's not always the case. And that's also not a deal breaker. It takes up a good chunk of your time, or you could see yourself doing it for a good chunk of time. You are able to find a community of people surrounding a thing. And you also may identify with your hobby. In my books, for a hobby to be a hobby, it needs to transcend time meaning that you could do it or envision yourself doing it for years. It's totally okay if your interests change, but I think kind of setting out with this idea can help you navigate is something a fixation or if it's a hobby. More on that in a second. The last thing I think to consider, or one of the benefits, I should say, of having a bona fide hobby is that hobbies can be really great ways to reduce your stress or to kind of lean on in times of stress. It may take a while to get there or to do something often enough for that thing to be an outlet, escape, or a relaxation, a place of relaxation. But if you kind of persevere, this can definitely happen and just be a really big upside. So a few things to consider. Number one, just because you spend time on something doesn't inherently make that thing a hobby. And number two, fixations aren't hobbies. Let's address number one first. I think a really good example is TV, because a lot of people watch TV, or if you don't own cable, maybe we're just talking like Netflix or something. In many cases, I do not think TV watching is a hobby. People might want to consider it as a hobby if like you're exploring what might be a hobby because they have an interest in watching television or like watching Netflix. There are clear exceptions, but overall TV is pretty passive, or it can be passive. It's passive when it's a way to unwind and a way to pass time. We typically don't watch TV for the same reasons all the time. Sometimes you do need a way to not think about your day and relax and distance yourself. You know, you might need a distraction. The main reason why I wouldn't consider watching TV a hobby is if you use it to pass the time. If that's the case, what you're doing doesn't really matter. You're likely watching TV because it's entertaining, or it's the most entertaining option out there, and also probably the most convenient or the most ingrained thing to do to pass the time. And at that point, what you're doing doesn't matter. Like you could be watching paint dry or watching a clock on a wall. The what doesn't matter if what you're trying to do is pass time. And hobbies are largely not focused on passing time. Something being entertaining to you doesn't inherently make that thing a hobby either. It's okay to maybe start there or think about things you find entertaining, but that alone doesn't make something a hobby. I mentioned fixations earlier and I want to come back to them now because a hyperfixation or fixating on something isn't a hobby. This time last year, I was super fixated on solitaire. I played every single day for 3 months and now I don't. If we do not differentiate between fixations and hobbies, what can happen is that we can conflate them. We can mix them up and feel comfortable or good spending time on fixations, believing they're a hobby, only to have them be fleeting. And then you have tons of stuff in your home. You can have clutter or just like reminders of money you spent or things that didn't work out. If we have a hard time differentiating between fixations and hobbies, we can come to see or believe our fixations are hobbies and therefore justify spending money because we feel like we're doing something good for ourselves by spending money on our hobbies. And so I think it's worth taking a look at your past fixations of maybe the last month or the last few months and just kind of taking some time to digest them, maybe like journaling or just considering why or when something is a fixation or a hobby, or maybe developing some metrics yourself to help you differentiate if you're not sure. One of the ways I think about it is intense focus or pleasure. Like I'll know something is a fixation if like all I want to do, as an example, is like watch this one show. If I'll let everything else go to watch this show. You know, it could be anything, but that's like a recent example. I can't sustain that level of interest, that level of engagement long term. We'll talk more about strategies on this in a little bit. In my opinion, intent and fulfillment matter a lot. We all have things we are passionate about or at the very least interested in, and things we find compelling and fulfilling. When we're able to pinpoint these things and pursue them, it can make our lives more fulfilling and interesting and more enjoyable. It can make the act of living our lives, our everyday lives, more enjoyable. You can get a little extra pep in your step or a little like zing for life or zest for life by like being able to identify and pursue, be the difference or part of the difference in living your life and existing. Does watching TV make you feel this way? Perhaps. Perhaps there are shows out there or movies out there that do make you feel that way. A lot of millennials can resonate with the Harry Potter example. I know a lot of millennials who had Harry Potter as a hobby in chat rooms and forums or just, reading or watching, being part of the fandom or the community. For some hobbies, the community is very much part of the experience and kind of being in a subculture. This was true for Harry Potter and other kinds of media, but also I think sports is another great example. Sometimes the subculture of the sport or the community of the thing could be 80% of what you like about the hobby. There are other hobbies out there that are more solo, and it's actually the act of the thing that is the enjoyable part. I'm thinking about things like writing or drawing. There are other things that might be a bit of both. There are certain sports that there are community components to it. Like if you play soccer as an example, or volleyball or hockey, there are quite often community aspects that make playing enjoyable. But there are also solo sports like running where you could find online community or in-person communities like running clubs that can kind of help turn something solo into something more community driven. Same thing with any of the things I mentioned, like writing or reading. There are tons of ways to find community with a hobby. And I have found, just personally speaking, running and reading are two of my biggest hobbies. I do not want or care about a community with running, but I love it with books. So if you're still with me and you don't currently have a hobby and you might be wondering, well, like, what do I do? How do I figure it out? Let's talk about it. I think a great place to start is to really consider your interests and passions. And it could be a bit of an overwhelming question to ask yourself, like, what do I like or what are my interests? But you could think about it like, what fuels me? What lights me up? What do I love to talk about? What are things that you could talk for hours about? One of my favorite activities for this is creating a light up list, brainstorming what lights me up, what do I love to talk about. This is a great place to start because you're starting with what you know, opposed to finding things that you don't know. I think exploring that question could also be helpful because sometimes what we want is to maybe like discover ourselves, or we're not sure what we like, or we want to find something new. And if you know that about yourself, then you're already kind of setting a path for yourself to explore. I found ballet that way. I found running that way. And it can be really great to find new interests or parts of yourself that you didn't know were there. My light up list now would include things like reading, running, journaling, planners and stationery, ballet, conscious consumption, sustainability and environmentalism. It's also worth considering whether finding community with an interest you already have might make the difference. Let's say you're somebody who likes chess as an example, and you play chess on your phone. That might not feel exciting because maybe you've done it for a while. That could be a great indication that this is a hobby. However, finding a community around chess could make that thing a more sustainable and enjoyable hobby. So that is also an avenue to explore. I personally found community around reading this year. And it's been over the past year, it started in 2023. But it was the first time over the past roughly 12 to 14 months where I have found community in reading for the first time. And I kind of accepted the things that I liked and stopped being embarrassed about them. I think more accurately to say, I allowed myself to be in a fandom. And when Iron Flame was released last year, that was the first time in my adult life, first time in my life period, where I was part of a fandom while things were being released. I've gained interest in stuff once things were off the air or no longer a thing anymore. but I've never been a part of one while it was happening in real time. And it was so exciting. And I think that was a really big part of why reading kind of became, it became more enjoyable. There's so many different kinds of hobbies out there. And I think it could also be worth maybe exploring. Is there a category of thing that you would like a hobby in? That wasn't very well phrased. I'm talking about like creative hobbies or physical hobbies, social hobbies as an example. Knowing maybe where your hobby might lie could help you get more clear or pursue something at a more specific level. We're going to end on a few questions, and these are more like journaling prompt or like thought questions that might help you get a little bit more specific. So we're just going to go through them before we close. Number 1, how do you want to feel? So as an example, do you want to feel energized, relaxed, creative, or engaged? Finding a hobby to match that feeling could be a place to start. So if you want to feel relaxed, as an example, maybe learning to swim is not the place to be. Number 2, are you interested in learning? If so, how much? Many new hobbies, although not everyone, but many new hobbies have a learning curve. A lot of sports have a learning curve. A lot of creative hobbies have a learning curve. Are you interested in doing any of that? And if you are, what kind of learning curve are you comfortable with? Because some things are so far out of our comfort zone, we think we might like them, but you are just not at the point in your life, not fully prepared to, let's say, learn an entirely brand new language. Number 3, what helps me stay engaged? Sometimes the missing ingredient is the engagement or the follow-through aspect. Like you've always wanted to try painting and you have some painting supplies, but you don't really think that it's a hobby. And then you find Bob Ross videos and then all of a sudden you're set. Or you find a watercolor class and all of a sudden you're set. I found that to be a little bit the case with ballet. I really like it. I love watching it. And when I have a weekly class, it helps with my consistency and also just, it gives me a way to stay engaged and a way to participate in some kind of accountability, which I didn't get when I was doing it alone. When I was doing it alone, I wasn't taking classes. I kind of fell off a little bit. Is there anything I used to do or always wanted to do, try, or learn? I think many people have something that they did in childhood. Ballet is a classic example. There's always at least a person who used to dance as a kid who, gave it up for one reason or another and comes back and they're trying to find the joy of dance. There's so many people who played sports as kids. Another classic example, and they can find that again as adults. Finding a new hobby can truly be an enjoyable experience, and it can be an experience. That's the thing, like you can turn finding a new hobby into like a fun activity or a fun experience where you try things for a few weeks or you dabble in a few areas. And if it takes a little while, I would encourage you to keep going and to not get discouraged, because it just might take some time and it could be fun if you let it be fun. In the description, I've included a list of 125 different hobbies. These are just a place to start and not necessarily an exhaustive list, because one of the great things about 2024 is that so many niche things are hobbies and we might not realize that something exists, or we could just assume that it doesn't. That's it for me today. I would love to hear from you. What are your hobbies? What do you like about them? Let me know in the comments. And if you also discovered a new hobby in the last, we'll say 3 years, let me know about that too and how that went for you. So thank you so much for watching, hanging out with me. I would love it if you would subscribe to catch more content like this, and I hope to see you again for a new video soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.